So you're doing some 10 pulls on the current banner, and while you don't get a 5-star, you do get 4-star Lynette. Now, what do you get with Lynette? Besides my first video to break 10,000 views way back when I first started, yes, this channel was almost in Lynette we trust, but Layla won out. Well, Lynette is a sword-wielding animo user whose burst is actually pretty good at absorbing, reapplying elements, and doing a little bit of crowd control. And in this video, we are going to look at the basics of Lynette, her skill, her burst, how they work, even into some artifacts and weapons. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we are going to look at the current build of the current character that we are using for this video. Now, I did take my build off of Kazuha and put it on Lynette, so that way somebody could have kind of like a later look or a look at a later build. But my Lynette is level 60 out of 70 with 800 attack, 12,000 HP, 578 EM, that is from stealing Kazuha's artifacts, crit split 26 over 82.6, energy recharge 127.2. For a weapon, a level 90 R5 Iron Sting, which we'll talk more about weapons later on. Artifacts, 4-piece VV set, which is going to be really good for her. Constellations C5. We are going to talk about constellations too for a very specific reason. Talents are going to be 159. So the constellations, if you have pulled a Lynette off of this banner, that means that you should have C1 at a minimum. You are given Lynette for free. I believe it's once you reach AR 25, you get Lynette for free. So you should at least have C1 if you've gotten her from a pull on this banner. So real quick, we're going to go through the constellations and see how they change her playstyle. C1. When her skill hits an opponent within the shadow sign, which we'll talk about, a vortex will be created and the opponents nearby will be pulled in. It gives her a little bit of grouping with her skill. C2, whenever her burst fires a vivid shot, it will fire an extra vivid shot, which we'll talk about that again as well. C3 is going to be a normal one. C4, it increases the charge of her skill by 1, which I'll show you. C5 is going to be a normal one. C6, after using her skill, you get animo infusion and 20% animo damage bonus. This allows you to use Lynette on field for damage, right? Before C6, it's kind of difficult to use her on field. She's mainly going to be an off-field damage dealer, but C6 allows her to do damage on field pretty well. So now we are going to go look at her skill and her burst. So her normal attacks are going to be pretty normal. Of course, they're normal attacks. She's going to swing her sword. She's going to do some consecutive hits. She does do this cool little backflip. Her charge attack is just going to do a flurry, like a lot of other sword users. She doesn't get infusion or anything like that unless you have your C6 after you use her skill. But her normal and her charge attacks are going to be pretty standard. Now we're going to look at her skill. Notice down below where my E is, there are 2 little dots. That is the extra charge on her skill that you get with that constellation. Her skill is going to have a tap and a hold. If you just tap it, then it is going to do an animo damage as well as that darker blue thing coming down. That's going to be a Ouija damage, which was introduced in Fontaine. So it's really good for Fontaine exploration, but it's going to do an animo damage swirling any elements that are present. If you hold it, you will be able to run around very fast, and you see this little mark that keeps kind of jumping between enemies. That is the shadow sign. If you tap her skill again, you will end the skill early, attacking the enemy that has the shadow sign. So as long as you hit the one with the shadow sign, you're going to get that extra grouping. Something else to notice with her skill. Whenever you use it, she will heal herself. Notice her HP bar. For the next 4 seconds, she will lose HP. It is 6% per second, meaning that you can get back up to full health. You can heal Lynette with using this. It will take a long time if you start losing a ton of HP, but you can do it. Now we're going to talk about her burst, and her burst is going to summon this Boggle Cat. This Boggle Cat is going to do pulses of animo damage, but it also has elemental absorption, meaning that if you hit the Boggle Cat with an element, or if there's an element nearby, it will absorb it and it will reapply it with those 2 vivid shots that you're seeing. And it will also attract or taunt enemies, giving some crowd control, making the enemies come near it. Now, all animo characters have an elemental absorption priority, and all but 2 share the same. Lynette's and Animo Traveler have a slightly different elemental absorption priority. You'll see above my head, I will list what Lynette's elemental absorption priority is. So if the first element is present, it will absorb that. If not, it will start looking for the other elements. If you have multiple elements present, it will find and absorb the first one, the one with the most priority. So if you want to try and force an element to be absorbed, it is best to either apply it to yourself with like Barbara or Benny, or just have it nearby, like Barbara's skill, Kaya's burst, Xiangling with Guoba. You can almost always get the element you want, unless the enemy is chunking these other elemental bottle things at you, then it can kind of get a little dicey. But you also notice that her burst does send out 2 of those vivid shots. That is because of her Constellation. Now, both of her passives also deal with her burst. The first one, after using her burst, your entire party gets an attack buff based on how many different elements you have in it. The second one is just going to increase the damage from her burst. So now we're going to look at some artifact sets for Lynette. Obviously, VV is a phenomenal one for later in the game, but we're going to focus more on like a 3 or 4 star set. So 4-piece Gambler is going to be very, very good for her because it gets up your elemental skill damage, as well as when defeating an enemy, it resets your skill cooldown. We talked about how Lynette has a really long elemental skill cooldown. This will help reset it. So you could possibly get 3 uses out of her skill with Constellations. So if you want to run more like a burst support, then you can run like 4-piece Exile or 2-piece Gambler, 2-piece Exile. That way you'll still be getting the skill damage and you'll be getting more energy for her burst. For main stats, if you are going to be running her in a swirl team where you want her swirls to do the damage, then Elemental Mastery across the board. If you want to increase Lynette's personal damage and you're not really worried about the swirl damage, then you're going to want to run like attack percent or elemental mastery or ER, so that way you can use her burst more, animo damage bonus, and then crit rate or crit damage. For weapons, we do have 4-star Iron Sting, which is going to be a phenomenal weapon for her. It's craftable. You can get it fairly early into the game, and they're easy to refine, so you can get a lot of good use out of Iron Sting, especially if you're going to be running her with swirling. There's also Wolf Fang, which is a battle pass weapon. So if you pay for the battle pass, you can get it very early into the game. At level 30 of the battle pass, increases crit rate, and then it's going to increase your skill and burst damage. This is going to work better at like C6 with her because you're going to want her on the field to get the full passive from Wolf Fang. As far as the 3-star weapon goes, Skyrider Sword is going to be pretty good. It's going to get up energy recharge, and it's going to increase attack and movement speed for your whole party upon using your burst. This will allow her to be a burst support, where you're going to be really kind of focused on using her burst as much as possible to get the elemental absorption, to get the crowd control. Now we're going to look at a team for Lynette, especially early on. And this team behind me, Lynette, Xiangling, Kaya, and Barbara, is going to be a great foundation for a lot of teams. This is going to be considered a rainbow team where you're going to have 4 different elements, getting the attack buff passive with her burst, right? So it's going to be very good. In this team, you're essentially going to be using Lynette to crowd control, spread around elements, and let Xiangling cause melt reactions galore. You're going to want Xiangling using her burst a ton, so that way you can get melt reactions with her burst or vaporize reactions using Kaya and Barbara to supply those. So you can either infuse or absorb cryo or hydro into the burst. That way Xiangling can get more melts or more vaporize, or you could let Xiangling's pyro absorb into the burst and then just let Kaya's burst get the melts, or Barbara's skill get the vaporize if you want to, or run like on-field Barbara and let Barbara hit the enemy to get the vaporize, because you can do on-field damage Barbara. There's a lot of ways that you could do this team. Now, I said it was a great foundation because let's just take out Kaya and put in like Ganyu, which I don't have Ganyu, but pretend I do, and take out Barbara and put in Coco. This is a much more standard melt vaporize team with Ganyu doing the charged attacks to get the melt reactions. So that is going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, do be sure to leave it down in the comments. Myself or somebody else, be sure to answer it, and I'll see you in the next one.